The great chamber of Station Zenith Prime hung in the darkness between stars, a monument to the power and glory of the Galactic Council. Inside the massive hall, representatives from 47 alien civilizations sat in their designated sections, their forms as varied as the worlds they came from. Some breathed methane, others existed as clouds of sentient gas contained in environmental suits, some had scales, others had fur, and a few had crystalline bodies that refracted the chamber's light into rainbow patterns across the walls. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood alone in the center of the chamber floor. She wore a simple dark blue uniform with Earth's flag on her shoulder. Her black hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her face remained calm despite the weight of what was happening. Around her, the alien representatives looked down from their elevated seats like judges in an ancient trial. The silence in the chamber felt heavy, pressing down on her shoulders. At the highest seat sat Velkoth, the council's speaker. He was a towering figure, nearly 3 meters tall, with midnight blue skin and 4 eyes arranged vertically on his elongated head. His species, the Nathari, had been spacefaring for over 12,000 years. They considered themselves the architects of galactic civilization, and they had little patience for young species like humanity. Velkoth's voice boomed through the chamber, translated instantly into thousands of languages by the station systems. Human Ambassador Chen, you stand before the Galactic Council to receive judgment. Your species has been found in violation of 17 major protocols and 43 minor regulations. You have expanded beyond your permitted zones. You have refused mandatory genetic modifications to make your people more docile and cooperative. You have maintained military forces far beyond what is appropriate for a species of your limited development. Sarah listened without interrupting. She had expected this. Earth's diplomats had known for years that this moment would come. The Council did not tolerate independent thinking, especially not from species they considered children in the grand scale of galactic history. Humanity has existed in space for only 300 of your years, Velkoth continued, his 4 eyes fixed on Sarah. The youngest species currently seated on this council has been traveling between stars for 6,000 years. You are infants, dangerous infants who refuse to follow the guidance of your elders. A ripple of agreement moved through the chamber. Several representatives made sounds that the translators rendered as approval. A delegate from the Score Collective, insectoid creatures with razor-sharp mandibles, clicked enthusiastically. The Luminar, beings of pure thought housed in crystalline matrices, pulsed with colors that indicated satisfaction. Sarah had studied each species before coming here. She knew their histories, their cultures, and their prejudices. The Council believed absolutely in their own superiority. They had created a galactic order that had lasted for millennia, and they saw any deviation from their rules as a threat to stability. Humanity's independence was such a deviation. We have been patient with your species, Velkoth said, and Sarah almost laughed at that. Patient was not the word she would have used. The Council had placed restrictions on human expansion from the moment Earth had developed faster than light travel. They had demanded access to human genetic information. They had tried to install observers on every human colony. They had done everything possible to control and contain humanity without quite triggering an open war. But humanity had grown anyway. Earth's children had spread to 127 colony worlds. They had terraformed hostile planets, built cities and asteroid belts, and established mining operations in the hearts of gas giants. Every time the Council said something was impossible or too dangerous, humans had done it anyway. Not because they were trying to rebel, but because that was simply how humans were. They pushed boundaries. They explored. They adapted. They survived. Your time for disobedience has ended, Velkoth declared. His voice carried the weight of absolute authority. The Galactic Council hereby issues the following ultimatum to the human species. You will surrender control of Earth and all colony worlds to Council administration within 30 standard cycles. Your military forces will be disbanded. Your industrial capacity will be reduced to appropriate levels. Your genetic lines will be modified to remove your aggressive tendencies. You will become a protectorate species, guided by wiser civilizations until such time as you prove capable of civilized behavior. The chamber erupted in approving sounds. The representatives clearly believed this was a generous offer. They were allowing humanity to survive after all. Many species that had defied the Council had been sterilized, their populations reduced to manageable numbers. their culture absorbed into the greater galactic civilization until nothing unique remained. "And if we refuse this ultimatum?" Sarah asked. Her voice was quiet but clear, carrying through the chamber's acoustics. Velkoth's 4 eyes narrowed. "Then the Council's Grand Fleet will implement the ultimatum by force. Your worlds will be occupied. Resistance will be met with overwhelming power. We have no desire to exterminate your species, Ambassador Chen, but we will not allow the stability of galactic civilization to be threatened by one stubborn juvenile species." Sarah felt anger burning in her chest, but she kept it off her face. She had been chosen for this role because she could maintain control even when everything inside her wanted to scream. She thought about Earth, the blue-green world where humanity had been born. She thought about the colonies, each one a testament to human determination and ingenuity. She thought about all the people who would be affected by the Council's decision. 30 cycles, she said. "You said we have 30 cycles to respond." "That is correct," Velkoth replied. "We are not unreasonable. We understand that your species will need time to process this decision and to organize your surrender. 30 cycles should be sufficient. And in those 30 cycles, we are free to prepare our response as we see fit." Velkoth made a sound that the translator interpreted as amusement. "Prepare as you wish, Ambassador. Fortify your homeworld if it brings you comfort, but understand that the Grand Fleet has never been defeated. We have the combined military might of 47 spacefaring civilizations. Your kinetic projectile weapons and chemical rockets are primitive by our standards. Your armor cannot withstand our plasma beams. Your sensors are blind compared to our detection systems. This is not a negotiation. This is an inevitability." Other representatives joined in what could only be called laughter. The Vreen, gaseous beings who communicated through patterns of electromagnetic radiation, flickered with colors that indicated amusement. The Karathi, massive creatures with 6 legs and crystalline armor, stamped their feet in rhythmic patterns that signified contempt. Sarah let them laugh. She had expected this too. The Council saw only what they wanted to see. They looked at humanity and saw a species barely 3 centuries old in space. They saw primitive technology and aggressive tendencies. They saw a problem to be solved, a threat to be neutralized. What they did not see was the full picture. "Very well," Sarah said when the laughter died down. "The human species accepts your timeline. We will deliver our response within 30 cycles." Velkoth seemed surprised that she had not argued more. "You accept the ultimatum, then?" "I accept that you have given us 30 cycles," Sarah replied carefully. "Our response will be delivered at the end of that period. In person." "In person?" Velkoth's tone suggested he thought Sarah had lost her mind. "You wish to return here to formally surrender?" "I said we would deliver our response in person," Sarah repeated. "All of us." A confused murmur ran through the chamber. The representatives were not sure what Sarah meant by all of us. Did she mean all human ambassadors? "All human leaders?" The statement seemed strange, but Velkoth dismissed it with a wave of one long-fingered hand. "As you wish. Return here in 30 cycles with your official surrender, witnessed by all your leaders if that gives you comfort. The Council will accept your submission and begin the integration process." "You are dismissed, Ambassador Chen." Sarah bowed slightly, a gesture of respect that cost her nothing. Then she turned and walked toward the chamber's exit. Her footsteps echoed in the vast space. She could feel thousands of alien eyes watching her go, most of them feeling pity or contempt. They saw a representative of a doomed species, walking to her fate with dignity. They thought they understood what would happen next. They were wrong. As Sarah's shuttle departed from Station Zenith Prime and began its journey back to human space, she allowed herself a small smile. The Council had made several critical mistakes. They had assumed human surrender was inevitable. They had given humanity 30 cycles to prepare, and most importantly, they had underestimated what humans were capable of when their survival was at stake. The shuttle's communication system came alive with encrypted transmissions. Sarah's second-in-command, Commander James Park, appeared on the screen. His face was tense. "Ambassador, we received your signal. Did they really do it? Did they issue the ultimatum?" "They did," Sarah confirmed. 30 cycles. Surrender or face the Grand Fleet." James let out a breath. "Then it's time. We activate the Exodus Protocol." Sarah nodded. The Exodus Protocol had been developed in secret over the past 50 years, ever since humanity's first real contact with the Galactic Council. Earth's leaders had quickly realized that the Council would never accept humanity as equals. The Council's entire civilization was built on hierarchy, on ancient species ruling over younger ones. There were no partnerships, no true alliances. There was only submission or conflict. So humanity had prepared. While the Council watched Earth and the major colonies, humans had been building in the shadows, in asteroid belts far from normal trade routes, in the hearts of gas giants where Council sensors could not penetrate, in the dark spaces between stars. Humanity had been building and waiting for this exact moment. "Send the signal," Sarah ordered. "All colonies, all stations, all fleets. Exodus protocol is active. We have 30 cycles to show the Council what humans really are." 30 cycles to prepare for war, James said quietly. "No," Sarah corrected him. 30 cycles to show them that we are not a species that surrenders. We are not a species that bows. We are humans, and we survived the climb from the bottom of Earth's food chain. We survived ice ages and plagues and wars. We survived our own worst instincts, and we will survive this. The shuttle jumped to faster than light speed, heading back toward human space. Behind them, Station Zenith Prime hung in the darkness, its inhabitants already celebrating their victory over the stubborn humans. They believed the matter was settled. In 30 cycles, humanity would surrender or be crushed. But they did not know what was waiting in the dark. They did not know about the shipyards hidden in the Kuiper Belt, building vessels by the thousands. They did not know about the massive industrial complexes buried beneath the surfaces of airless moons. They did not know that every human colony world had been designed from the start to be a fortress factory, capable of producing war materials at rates that would have seemed impossible to the Council's careful, conservative planners. The Council had spent millennia maintaining their order, their stability, their careful balance of power. They had forgotten what it meant to be a young species fighting for survival. They had forgotten the hunger, the drive, the absolute refusal to die that characterized species still climbing toward the stars. Humanity remembered. Humanity had never forgotten. And now, the Council would learn what it meant to threaten a species that had earned its place in the universe through blood, sweat, and absolute determination. In 30 cycles, the Council expected humanity's surrender. In 30 cycles, they would get their answer. But it would not be the answer they expected. The darkness between stars suddenly seemed much less empty. Across human space, the word spread like wildfire. The moment they had prepared for had arrived. The Council had made their move. Now it was humanity's turn to respond, and when they did, the heavens themselves would bear witness. The first cycle after the ultimatum passed in relative normalcy. Human cargo ships continued their routes between colonies. Communication channels carried their usual traffic of messages, entertainment broadcasts, and data transfers. The Council's observers, stationed on the edges of human space, reported nothing unusual. Everything seemed to be continuing as it had before. Then, on the second cycle, something changed. The communication channels went silent. Not all at once, but gradually, like lights being turned off one by one across a vast city. First, the entertainment broadcasts stopped, then the commercial traffic, then the diplomatic channels. By the end of the third cycle, human space had gone completely dark. No signals came out. No ships departed for Council territories. The borders of human space became a wall of silence. On Station Zenith Prime, Velkoth reviewed the reports with growing confusion. "They have cut off all communication?" he asked his intelligence staff. "Yes, Speaker," replied his chief analyst, a luminar named Crystallis, whose thought matrix glowed with patterns indicating uncertainty. "All outgoing signals have ceased. We are still receiving some automated beacon transmissions from navigation buoys, but no actual communication traffic. It is as if they have sealed their borders completely." Velkoth drummed his long fingers on the armrest of his seat. This was unexpected, but not necessarily alarming. They are preparing to surrender. Perhaps there are internal disagreements about how to proceed. Let them argue among themselves. The outcome remains the same. But as more cycles passed, the Council's intelligence services began picking up other signals. Not communications, but something else. Energy signatures. Massive amounts of industrial activity across all human worlds. Mining operations running at maximum capacity. Fusion reactors being brought online by the hundreds. Shipyard energy signatures that suggested extensive construction work. Crystallis brought these reports to Velkoth on the 10th cycle. Speaker, we are detecting unusual patterns of activity throughout human space. Every colony world shows increased industrial output. Their energy consumption has increased by 40% across all territories. They are fortifying, Velkoth concluded, building defenses around Earth, no doubt. A final desperate gesture before they surrender. It changes nothing. Our Grand Fleet can reduce any fortifications they build to rubble. But Crystallis was not convinced. The Luminar's crystalline form flickered with colors that indicated concern. With respect, Speaker, the energy signature suggests something more extensive than simple fortifications. The scale of activity is unprecedented. They appear to be mobilizing their entire industrial capacity. Then they mobilize, Velkoth said dismissively. Let them build their defenses. It will make no difference when the Grand Fleet arrives. You worry too much, old friend. Humanity is a young species facing the combined might of 47 ancient civilizations. They know they cannot win. They are simply doing what young species do when cornered. They thrash about uselessly before accepting the inevitable. Crystallis returned to the intelligence center, but the Luminar's concerns did not diminish. Something about the human response felt wrong. Too organized, too coordinated, too prepared. Meanwhile, in the heart of human space, the true scope of the Exodus Protocol was becoming apparent. On Earth, in the underground command center beneath the North American continent, Admiral Marcus Rivera stood before a holographic display that showed the entire theater of operations. He was a tall man with gray hair and dark eyes that had seen more combat than he cared to remember. He had commanded fleets in the border skirmishes with pirate groups and the few minor conflicts humanity had faced in its expansion. But nothing in his experience compared to what he was coordinating now. Status report, he ordered, his voice calm despite the enormous pressure he felt. Captain Elena Torres, his operations officer, pulled up the relevant data. Sir, all primary construction facilities are operating at maximum output. The hidden shipyards in the Kuiper Belt have completed another 1,000 units. The facilities at Titan, Europa, and Ganymede are ahead of schedule. The deep space construction platforms have finished their assigned quotas and are moving on to the reserve lists. Rivera studied the numbers flowing across his display. 127 colony worlds, each with its own industrial capacity, each contributing to the fleet that was being assembled. It was a logistical nightmare that would have been impossible without decades of careful planning. What about the civilian conversions? He asked. Proceeding smoothly, sir. We have over 50,000 cargo vessels being retrofitted for combat operations. They will not be as capable as our military ships, but they can mount weapons and will add to our numbers. Additionally, every space station in human space is being equipped with defensive and offensive systems. We are turning our entire civilization into a war machine. Rivera nodded. This was exactly what the Exodus Protocol had been designed to do. Humanity had learned hard lessons from Earth's history. The species that survived were not always the strongest or the most technologically advanced. They were the ones who could adapt, who could mobilize completely when necessary, who could turn every resource toward survival when threatened. Time until fleet assembly is complete? Rivera asked. 23 cycles, sir. We are ahead of schedule. The preparations made over the past 50 years are paying off. Every colony knew exactly what to do when the protocol was activated. That had been the key insight that Earth's planners had understood. The Council saw human expansion as chaotic and disorganized. They saw humans building colonies on hostile worlds and thought it was desperation or foolishness. They did not understand that every hostile world was a training ground, a place where humans learned to build and survive in the harshest conditions. Every colony built underground or in the vacuum of space taught humans how to create industrial facilities that could operate in secret, hidden from casual observation. The Council had watched Earth and the major colonies. They had not watched the asteroid miners or the deep space prospectors. They had not paid attention to the gas giant harvesters or the comet ranchers, and they certainly had not noticed the slow, steady construction of shipyards in places where no sane species would build them. In the crushing gravity wells of dense asteroids, in the radiation-soaked environments near Jupiter-class planets, in the cold darkness beyond the normal edges of stellar systems. On Mars, Governor Li Chen, no relation to Ambassador Sarah Chen, addressed a gathering of industrial leaders. The council thinks we are farmers and miners, she said. They think we build on hostile worlds because we have no choice. They do not understand that we chose these places specifically because they make us strong. We learned to build under crushing gravity, in toxic atmospheres in the vacuum of space. We learned to create self-sufficient colonies that could survive without support from Earth. And now, all of that experience, all of that knowledge, is being put to the purpose for which it was always intended. The industrial leaders listened intently. They represented the mining consortiums, the terraforming corporations, the shipbuilding companies, and the manufacturing conglomerates that formed the backbone of human civilization. They had all known this day would come. They had all prepared for it. How many ships can we contribute? Governor Chen asked. The representative from the Mars Shipbuilding Corporation consulted her data pad. We have 45,000 vessels either completed or nearing completion. Military-grade warships, converted cargo haulers, armed passenger liners, even some of the old colony ships from the first wave of expansion. Everything that can mount a weapon and carry a crew is being prepared for combat. 45,000 ships from Mars alone. And Mars was just one world, admittedly one of the more industrialized ones. But across human space, similar reports were coming in from every colony, every station, every outpost. The numbers were staggering even to the humans coordinating them. In the outer system, in the Kuiper Belt where ancient ice and rock orbited in the cold darkness, the hidden shipyards worked around the clock. These facilities had been built over decades, disguised as mining operations and scientific stations. Council inspectors had occasionally visited, but had seen only what they expected to see: humans scraping resources from the edge of their system. What they had not seen were the massive construction bays hidden inside hollowed-out asteroids. They had not noticed the crews living in hardened bunkers designed to survive anything short of a direct nuclear strike. They had not detected the automated manufacturing systems that could produce ship components at incredible rates. Engineer Michael Okonkwo floated in zero gravity, inspecting the latest cruiser to roll out of Bay 17. The ship was 500 meters long, bristling with missile pods and kinetic accelerators. It was not as advanced as Council ships. Humans did not have plasma weapons or the energy shields that protected Council vessels. But what human ships lacked in technology, they made up for in ruggedness and firepower. "How does she look?" asked his assistant, a young woman named Rachel Park. "She looks ready to fight," Michael replied. "These ships are not elegant. They are not beautiful. But they are tough and they carry enough firepower to hurt anything they hit." Rachel grinned. "That is very human of us. We cannot build the fanciest ships, so we build the most determined ones." That captured something essential about human engineering philosophy. Council ships were marvels of technology, each one a work of art as much as a weapon. Human ships were functional, durable, and designed to keep fighting even when damaged. They reflected the species that built them: stubborn, resilient, and absolutely refusing to quit. As the cycles passed and the Council's deadline approached, the activity in human space reached a fever pitch. Every shipyard, every factory, every industrial facility was working at maximum capacity. Resources flowed through supply chains that had been planned and rehearsed for decades. Crews drilled endlessly on their new ships. Military forces that had never worked together practiced coordinated maneuvers. Civilian volunteers trained to serve as support crew on converted vessels. On Station Zenith Prime, Velkuth grew increasingly uneasy as reports continued to come in about human activity. By the 20th cycle, even he could not dismiss the scale of what the intelligence services were detecting. "They are not building defenses," Crystalis reported. "Or rather, they are not only building defenses." Speaker, "The energy signatures we are detecting suggest massive ship construction. Not hundreds of vessels, thousands, possibly tens of thousands." Velkuth felt a chill despite himself. "That is impossible. They do not have the industrial capacity. We have monitored their output. We know the limits of their production." "With respect, Speaker, perhaps we do not know as much as we thought. The humans have had 300 years to establish their colonies. They have built on over 100 worlds. If each world has been contributing to this construction effort," Velkuth did not want to finish that thought. "It does not matter. Numbers alone do not win wars. Quality matters more than quantity. One Council warship is worth 10 human vessels. Their primitive kinetic weapons cannot penetrate our shields. This changes nothing." But the speaker's words sounded hollow even to his own ears. He called for an emergency session of the Council's military leadership. Fleet Commander Jothik attended via holographic transmission from the Grand Fleet's assembly point. Jothik was an impressive figure even in hologram form. He stood nearly 4 meters tall, with 4 powerful arms and scaled skin that had turned silver with age. His species, the Krath, were legendary warriors who had conquered dozens of worlds before joining the Council. Jothik himself had commanded fleets for over 200 years. "Speaker!" Jothik's voice rumbled. "I have reviewed the intelligence reports. The humans are preparing for war. This is clear. Can they pose a threat to the Grand Fleet?" Velkoth asked. Jothik considered the question carefully. A threat? Perhaps a minor one. The Grand Fleet consists of 10,000 warships from 47 civilizations. Each ship is equipped with the finest weapons and defenses our species have developed over millennia. The humans have numbers, but they lack technology. They still use chemical rockets and solid projectiles. They do not have energy weapons or shield technology. In a direct engagement, we will crush them. "But," Velkoth prompted, sensing hesitation in the warrior's voice. "But I do not like surprises, and the humans are surprising us." They should have surrendered by now. They should have seen the futility of resistance. Instead, they mobilize everything they have. This suggests either foolish desperation or something we are not seeing. I recommend we proceed with caution. Velkoth wanted to argue but found he could not. The humans were behaving unexpectedly, and that was always dangerous in warfare. Still, the Council could not show weakness. They could not back down from their ultimatum. "Prepare the Grand Fleet," Velkoth ordered. "When the deadline expires, we will move into human space and implement the ultimatum by force if necessary. But attempt to minimize casualties. They are still a young species. Perhaps when they see our overwhelming power, they will come to their senses." Jothik bowed his great head in acknowledgement, and the transmission ended. Velkoth sat alone in his private chamber, staring at the star maps that showed human space. Such a small portion of the galaxy. Such a young species. Why were they being so difficult? In 10 more cycles, the deadline would expire. In 10 more cycles, the Grand Fleet would advance into Sol System, humanity's home. And then finally, this unfortunate situation would be resolved. One way or another, humanity would learn that the Galactic Council was not to be defied. What Velkoth did not know, what the Council could not know, was that in those 10 remaining cycles, the last pieces of humanity's preparation would fall into place. The shipyards would complete their final vessels. The crews would finish their training. The supply lines would be tested and confirmed. And most importantly, the fleet would assemble. All of it, every ship, every crew, every weapon, coming together in a display that would change the Council's understanding of what humanity truly was. The Grand Fleet assembled at the coordinates designated as Rally Point Zenith, a region of empty space carefully chosen to be outside human sensor range, but close enough for rapid deployment. Fleet Commander Jothik stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, and watched as the last of the 10,000 warships moved into formation. It was a sight that had brought countless species to their knees. The Grand Fleet represented the combined military might of 47 civilizations, some of whom had been traveling between stars since humans were still living in caves on Earth. Each ship was a masterpiece of technology. Energy shields that could absorb incredible amounts of damage, plasma weapons that could slice through armor like paper, sensors that could detect a single ship from light years away, faster than light drives that could cross systems in hours. The fleet was organized by species, each civilization contributing its own unique vessels. The Nathari provided heavy battleships with their characteristic elegant curves and devastating beam weapons. The Krath, Jothik's own people, contributed fast attack cruisers designed to overwhelm enemies with speed and firepower. The Luminar brought support ships that could coordinate fleet movements with thought-speed precision. The Score provided carriers filled with fighter craft that could swarm enemy positions. 10,000 ships. 10,000 crews. Millions of warriors representing the peak of galactic military power. Against them stood humanity, a species that had been in space for barely 3 centuries. A species that still relied on burning chemicals to push their ships through space. A species that fired solid projectiles instead of energy beams. Jothik should have felt confident. He had commanded fleets for 200 years. He had fought in 17 major campaigns and countless minor engagements. He had never lost a battle. The Grand Fleet had never lost a battle in its entire 5,000-year history, and yet, something troubled him. His tactical officer, a young Nithari named Pelkan, approached with the latest intelligence summary. "Commander, our scouts report continued high activity in human space. Their energy signatures suggest they have completed whatever they were building. However, we still cannot get clear readings on actual fleet strength. They are using some kind of emissions masking." "Emissions masking?" Jathik's voice carried a note of surprise. That was a relatively sophisticated technique. "I thought humans lacked advanced electronic warfare capabilities." "As did we all, Commander. But they are clearly employing something to prevent our sensors from getting accurate counts. Our best estimates suggest they have assembled somewhere between 10 and 20,000 vessels at various staging points throughout their territory." Jathik considered this. 20,000 vessels would outnumber the Grand Fleet 2-1, but that meant nothing if the vessels were inferior. A cargo ship with a missile strapped to it was still just a cargo ship. It would die to the first plasma beam that struck it. "What about the quality of their ships?" he asked. Pelkan manipulated the holographic display, bringing up images captured by long-range reconnaissance drones. "Consistent with previous observations, Commander. Hull construction appears to be titanium steel alloys with ceramic composite armor. No energy shields detected. Weapons appear to be primarily kinetic accelerators, mass drivers firing solid projectiles. Some vessels show missile batteries. A few have what appear to be directed energy weapons, but nothing comparable to our plasma arrays. So they have numbers, but no technological edge." Jathik relaxed slightly. Numbers could be overcome with superior tactics and technology. "What is the status of the ultimatum deadline?" 5 cycles remaining, Commander. After that, we are authorized to enter human space and implement council orders by force if necessary. Jathik dismissed Pelkan and turned his attention back to the fleet formation. The ships hung in the darkness of space, their running lights creating a constellation of artificial stars. Each vessel was a monument to its species' achievements. Each represented thousands of years of technological development. He activated his private communication channel to station Zenith Prime. Velkoth's hologram appeared before him, the speaker's 4 eyes looking tired and concerned. "Commander, I trust the fleet is prepared?" Velkoth asked. "The Grand Fleet is always prepared, Speaker. We await only the expiration of the deadline. However, I must advise caution. The humans are not behaving as expected." Velkoth's face showed irritation. "The humans are young and foolish. They think they can resist the inevitable. When they see the Grand Fleet, they will understand their error. How long until you can reach Sol system once we give the order?" "Approximately 6 hours at maximum, faster than light speed. We have plotted multiple approach vectors to avoid giving them advance warning of our arrival." "Good. When the deadline expires, proceed to Sol system. Show them our strength. If they still refuse to surrender, demonstrate the consequences of defiance. Destroy their military installations on Mars. That should convince them we are serious. As you command, Speaker." Jathik bowed and ended the transmission. He had destroyed military installations before. It was standard procedure when dealing with resistant species. Show overwhelming force. Destroy a target that hurts them but does not kill civilians and wait for them to reconsider their position. Usually it worked quickly. Species that saw what the Grand Fleet could do rarely continued fighting. But something about the humans nagged at him. They had spent 30 cycles not cowering or begging for mercy but preparing, building, mobilizing, as if they had expected this, as if they had planned for it. Jathik was a warrior, but he was also a student of history. He had read about species that fought beyond all reason, that refused to surrender even when logically defeated. Such species were rare, but they existed. They were dangerous because they did not follow the normal rules. They did not calculate odds and surrender when the mathematics turned against them. They fought because fighting was in their nature. Was humanity such a species? They had come from Earth, a world that by all accounts was remarkably hostile. Predators on land, sea, and air. Diseases that could wipe out millions. Weather that ranged from deadly heat to killing cold. Most species evolved on gentler worlds. Most species learned cooperation and civilization in environments that rewarded such behaviors. Humans had evolved in a crucible. They had climbed to the top of their world's food chain by being more determined, more adaptable, and more willing to fight than anything else on their planet. That was what the briefing said. But briefings were one thing. Reality was often another. The cycles passed slowly. Jothik reviewed the battle plans repeatedly. The fleet would approach Sol system on multiple vectors, appearing simultaneously to prevent the humans from concentrating their defenses. The first wave would eliminate any defensive satellites or space stations that showed hostile intent. The second wave would establish a blockade of Earth. The third wave would proceed to Mars and eliminate the military facilities there as a demonstration of power. It was a solid plan. It had worked against dozens of species over the millennia. It would work against humanity. It had to work. On the final cycle before the deadline expired, Jothik gathered his senior commanders for a final briefing. Representatives from each species within the fleet attended, either in person or via hologram. They filled the flagship's main briefing room, a demonstration of the Council's unity and diversity. "Warriors," Jothik began, his voice carrying the authority of 2 centuries of command. "In a few hours we will enter human space. Our mission is clear. We will show the humans the futility of resistance. We will convince them to accept the Council's generous terms. We will do this with minimum casualties if possible, but we will do this." A score commander, her mandibles clicking with eagerness, spoke up. "Commander, what level of force are we authorized to use?" "We are authorized to destroy military targets and industrial facilities. We are not authorized to target civilian populations unless they are directly engaging in military actions. The Council wishes to integrate humanity, not exterminate them. But make no mistake, if they fight, we will destroy their ability to fight." The commanders discussed tactics and contingencies for another hour. Jothik answered their questions and refined the battle plan based on their input. These were experienced warriors from species that had fought and won countless battles. Their confidence was evident. When the briefing ended, Jothik returned to his personal quarters for a final meditation. It was a Krath tradition before major battles, a time to center oneself, to accept the possibility of death, to prepare the mind for what was to come. But Jothik found his mind wandering to the humans. What were they thinking right now? Did they know the Grand Fleet was assembled and ready to enter their space? Were they afraid? Were they preparing some desperate last defense of their homeworld? Or were they smiling, knowing something the Council did not? The thought was troubling, but Jothik dismissed it. He was allowing the humans' unexpected behavior to make him paranoid. They were a young species. Dangerous perhaps, but young. They could not possibly have anything that would change the fundamental reality of the situation. The Grand Fleet was superior in every measurable way. The deadline expired according to the agreed-upon Galactic Standard Time. Jothik received confirmation from Station Zenith Prime. No surrender had been received. No communication from humanity at all. Just silence. "The Council has given the order," Velkoth's hologram informed him. "Proceed to Sol system. Implement the ultimatum. May your ancestors guide your path, Commander." Jothik stood on his bridge, surrounded by his crew. The moment had come. "Fleet," he transmitted on all channels. "Assume faster-than-light formation. Prepare to jump on my mark. Destination: Sol system, human space. Mark." The universe seemed to fold around them as 10,000 ships activated their faster-than-light drives simultaneously. Space warped and twisted, and the Grand Fleet vanished from Rally Point Zenith, beginning their 6-hour journey to humanity's home system. Jothik watched the faster-than-light tunnel on his displays, the swirling patterns of distorted spacetime. In 6 hours they would arrive at the edge of Sol system. They would emerge in overwhelming force, ready to demonstrate Council power. The humans would see them and understand. They would realize that resistance was futile. They would surrender, or they would be destroyed. It was that simple. It had always been that simple. Around him, his crew worked efficiently, monitoring the jump, ready to snap into combat mode the moment they emerged into normal space. They were professionals. They had done this before. They would do it again. But in the back of Jothik's mind, that nagging concern remained. Something about this felt wrong. Not the battle plan, not the fleet composition, not the tactics. Something else. Something he could not quite identify. A warrior learned to trust such instincts. They often meant the difference between victory and death. But what could he do? The Council had given its orders. The deadline had passed. The fleet was committed. 6 hours until they reached Sol system. 6 hours until they would discover what humanity's silence had been hiding. 6 hours until the Council would learn whether their assumptions about this young, primitive species were correct.
6 hours until everything changed.
The fleet moved through faster-than-light space, 10,000 ships traveling in carefully coordinated formation. Behind them, the rest of the galaxy continued its normal operations, unaware that history was being made. Ahead of them, humanity waited. And in the darkness between stars, in the cold vacuum of space, in the shipyards and stations and colonies throughout human territory, 300 billion humans prepared to answer the Council's ultimatum. Not with words, not with surrender, but with the only answer that truly mattered. The answer was coming. The Council would see it soon enough. And when they did, their understanding of humanity and their understanding of themselves would never be the same. The Grand Fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of Sol system, precisely on schedule. 10,000 warships materialized in normal space, their sensors immediately beginning to scan the area. Fleet Commander Jathic watched his tactical displays come alive with data as his ships registered their surroundings. "Report," he ordered. His forearms crossed over his chest in the traditional Krath stance of command readiness. Pelkan studied the sensor data flowing across his station. "Commander, we are at the designated coordinates, approximately 15 light minutes from Mars, 30 light minutes from Earth. Initial scans detect expected system traffic. Several thousand orbital satellites around Earth, typical defensive grid. Mars shows industrial facilities and military installations as briefed. No immediate hostile movements detected." Jathic nodded. "Broadcast the surrender demand on all frequencies. Give them one final opportunity to avoid bloodshed." The communication officer, a gaseous Vreen contained within an environmental suit, transmitted the message. It went out in every human language, on every frequency. Impossible to miss or ignore. "This is Fleet Commander Jathic of the Galactic Council Grand Fleet. You are in violation of Council law. Surrender all military forces immediately and prepare to receive Council administrators. You have 1 standard hour to comply. If you do not surrender, we will begin destroying your military installations, starting with those on Mars. This is your final warning." The message repeated, echoing through the solar system. On Earth, billions of humans heard it. On Mars, millions more listened. Throughout the colonies scattered across the system, humanity received the Council's ultimatum, and humanity's response began. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Marcus Rivera stood before his own tactical displays. The human flagship hung in space near Earth's moon, its crew at full combat readiness. Rivera was a veteran of every military engagement humanity had fought in space. He had trained for this moment his entire adult life. He had studied the Council's tactics, their weapons, their strategies. He had prepared his fleet for war against a technologically superior enemy. And now, finally, the moment had come. "Status of all fleet elements?" he asked. Captain Torres consulted her displays. "Sir, all units report ready. The fleet is distributed according to the Exodus plan. We have forces staged throughout the system and beyond, awaiting your orders." Rivera took a deep breath. This was it, the decision that would determine humanity's future. Surrender and accept subjugation, or fight and risk everything. It was not really a choice at all. "All ships," Rivera transmitted on the fleet-wide channel. "Execute Exodus Protocol Phase 7. Show them who we are." Throughout Sol system, human ships that had been running silent, their systems powered down to minimum levels, suddenly came alive. Fusion reactors surged to full power, weapon systems activated, sensors began active scanning, and most importantly, their faster-than-light drive spun up, preparing to jump. On the Grand Fleet's flagship, Pelkan Station suddenly erupted with alarms. "Commander! Faster-than-light signatures. Multiple signatures! Hundreds of them. No, thousands." Jathic whirled toward the tactical display. What he saw made his blood run cold. Across the solar system, ships were appearing out of faster-than-light travel. Not dozens, not hundreds. Thousands upon thousands of faster-than-light signatures, each one representing a vessel dropping into normal space. "How many?" he demanded. Pelkan's fingers flew across his controls, trying to get an accurate count as more and more signatures appeared. "Commander, The sensors are having trouble processing the data. At least 20,000 signatures. No, 30,000. Still increasing. They are appearing on every vector surrounding us." That was impossible. Jothik stared at the display as it filled with red markers indicating human ships. They appeared in clusters, entire fleets dropping out of faster-than-light travel in coordinated movements. They appeared ahead of the Grand Fleet, behind it, above and below. The Council's carefully planned approach vectors suddenly became a trap, with human forces appearing on all sides. 40,000 signatures, Pelkan reported, his voice rising with disbelief. 50,000. Commander, they are still coming. Jothik activated his command channel to all Council ships. All vessels, combat formation. Shields to maximum. Prepare for engagement. He turned to his communication officer. Get me Speaker Velkoth immediately. On Station Zenith Prime, Velkoth was already watching the data feeds from the Grand Fleet in horror. His four eyes tracked the growing number of human ships appearing throughout Sol system. This was not possible. The intelligence reports had suggested 20,000 ships at most. But the displays showed 60,000 human vessels, 70,000 still increasing. How did we not see this? He whispered to Crystallis, who stood beside him, the Luminar's crystalline form flickering with colors indicating shock and fear. They hid their fleet beyond the normal edges of the system, Crystallis responded, analyzing the data in real time. In the outer darkness, in the asteroid belts, in places our sensors did not thoroughly scan. They waited until our fleet committed to the system, then jumped in behind us. Speaker, this is a trap. This was always a trap. The display continued to update. 80,000 human ships. 90,000. And still they came, materializing out of faster-than-light travel like drops of rain becoming a flood. Jothik's communication came through. Speaker, we are surrounded. The humans have assembled a fleet of unprecedented size. They are appearing on all vectors. We are outnumbered at least 5-1, possibly more. Request immediate instructions. Velkoth could not speak for a moment. The Grand Fleet had never been outnumbered, not in 5,000 years of operations. They had always been the overwhelming force, the unbeatable Armada, and now in humanity's home system they were surrounded by a fleet that dwarfed their own. How many ships do they have? Velkoth finally managed to ask. On the Indomitable, Rivera smiled grimly as he watched the tactical display. The fleet was assembling exactly as planned. Ships from every human colony, every station, every outpost. The military vessels they had built in secret over 50 years. The converted civilian ships, cargo haulers, and colony transports fitted with weapons. The defense platforms that had been disguised as civilian stations. Everything. Everyone. All of it, coming together in one overwhelming display of force. Final count, Torres reported. 312,000 vessels, sir. Every ship we have, all accounted for. The fleet is assembled. 312,000 ships. Rivera could barely comprehend the number himself. It represented the total mobilization of human civilization. Every resource, every person who could crew a ship, every vessel that could mount a weapon. They had turned their entire society into a war machine. And this was the result. The Grand Fleet hung in space. 10,000 council ships suddenly looking very small against the backdrop of humanity's Armada. The human vessels spread across the solar system like a swarm of angry insects, their numbers beyond anything the Council had imagined possible. On the Council flagship, Pelkan finally completed his sensor sweep. Commander, confirmed count. 312,000 human vessels. They have us surrounded on every approach vector. We are outnumbered 31-1. Jothik felt the weight of 200 years of military experience telling him something his pride did not want to accept. This was a losing position. The Grand Fleet had superior technology, yes. Better weapons, better shields, better sensors. But numbers mattered. Numbers mattered enormously. And these numbers were impossible to overcome. Analyze their fleet composition, he ordered, clinging to the hope that most of those vessels were not real warships. Pelkan worked quickly. Approximately 60,000 appeared to be dedicated military vessels, comparable in size and configuration to our cruisers and destroyers. Another 80,000 appear to be converted civilian ships, cargo vessels, transports, colony ships equipped with weapons. The remaining vessels are varied. Small fighters, defense platforms, armed mining ships, patrol craft. Many appear to be outdated or improvised, but all are combat capable. 60,000 military vessels. The Grand Fleet had 10,000. Even if each council ship was worth 3 human ships, and Jothik was no longer certain that was true, the mathematics were brutal. Speaker, Jothic transmitted to Station Zenith Prime. "We are facing overwhelming numerical superiority. Recommend immediate negotiation rather than engagement. If we fight, many council ships will be destroyed. The humans clearly do not intend to surrender." On Station Zenith Prime, Velkoth struggled with the reality confronting him. The Council had issued an ultimatum expecting easy compliance. They had assembled the Grand Fleet as a show of force, never truly expecting to use it. And now that show of force was surrounded by an enemy fleet 30 times larger than anticipated. "Can we win?" Velkoth asked Crystallis directly. The Luminar's colors pulsed with patterns indicating calculation and consideration. "In a direct engagement? The Grand Fleet has superior technology, but the numerical disadvantage is severe. Best case scenario, we destroy perhaps 100,000 human ships before our own fleet is overwhelmed. Worst case, we are annihilated entirely. In either scenario, the Council loses the Grand Fleet, and humanity survives as a military power. This is not a winnable situation, Speaker." Velkoth felt centuries of Council authority crumbling around him. They had never faced a challenge like this. Young species were supposed to be terrified of the Grand Fleet, not surround it with overwhelming numbers. "How did they build so many ships?" he asked, still trying to understand what had happened. "They built on over 100 worlds," Crystallis replied. "Each world has been producing ships for decades, possibly since they first encountered the Council. They turned every hostile environment into a fortress factory. They hid construction in places we did not look carefully. And they planned this, Speaker. This was always their plan. They knew we would issue an ultimatum. They knew we would send the Grand Fleet, and they prepared for exactly this scenario." Velkoth looked at the display showing the mass of human ships surrounding the Council's forces, 300,000 vessels, each one representing human determination, human industry, human refusal to surrender. How had the Council so completely misunderstood this species? A new transmission came from the human fleet. Admiral Rivera's face appeared on the display, calm and professional. "Speaker Velkoth, Fleet Commander Jothic, this is Admiral Marcus Rivera of the Human Defense Fleet. You came to Sol System expecting our surrender. Instead, you find yourselves surrounded. Let me be very clear about your situation. You are outnumbered 30 to 1. Every approach vector is blocked. Every retreat path is covered. Your fleet is deep within our territory, far from reinforcement, and we are prepared to fight for as long as it takes." Rivera paused, letting that sink in. "However, we do not wish to destroy you. We did not build this fleet to conquer. We built it to survive. So I am offering you the same courtesy you offered us. 1 hour to decide. Leave our space now and we will not pursue. Return to the Council and tell them that humanity will not surrender. Tell them that we are willing to negotiate as equals, but we will not submit to subjugation." Another pause. "Or stay and fight. But understand that if you choose to fight, you will learn why humanity climbed to the top of Earth's food chain. You will learn why we survived ice ages and plagues and our own worst instincts. You will learn that we are not a species that bows to threats no matter how overwhelming they seem. The choice is yours. You have 1 hour." The transmission ended. The Grand Fleet hung in space, surrounded by more human ships than there were stars visible in Earth's night sky. The hunters had become the hunted. The overwhelming force had been overwhelmed. And on Earth, on Mars, on stations and colonies throughout Sol System, billions of humans watched their fleet holding the line. Their ships covered the heavens, a wall of metal and determination between humanity and subjugation. They had answered the Council's ultimatum not with words but with presence, not with pleading but with power. The Council had expected humanity's surrender. Instead, they had discovered what 300 years in space and 127 colony worlds could produce when a species refused to die quietly. They had discovered that humanity's greatest strength was not their technology or their tactics, but their absolute unwillingness to accept defeat. The hour began counting down. The Grand Fleet had a choice to make, and somewhere deep in the command structures of the Council, the realization was beginning to dawn that they had made a terrible mistake. They had threatened a species that viewed threats as challenges. They had tried to intimidate a species that had evolved in a world full of things trying to kill them. They had expected humanity's surrender. What they got instead was a lesson in what it meant to threaten a species that simply did not know how to quit. The hour that Admiral Rivera gave the Grand Fleet felt like an eternity for everyone involved. On the Council flagship, Fleet Commander Jothic gathered his senior staff for an emergency council of war. The holographic conference room filled with the faces of commanders representing 47 different species, each one grappling with the impossible situation they faced. "We cannot retreat without a fight," insisted the score commander, her mandibles clicking with agitation. "The Grand Fleet has never withdrawn in the face of an enemy. To do so would damage Council authority throughout the galaxy. Every species would question our strength. Pride is irrelevant if the fleet is destroyed," countered a Luminar strategist, his crystalline form pulsing with urgent colors. "We are surrounded by overwhelming numbers. Yes, we have superior technology, but can superior technology overcome a 30-to-1 numerical disadvantage? The mathematics are not in our favor." A Nathari captain, his 4 eyes showing deep concern, added his perspective. "If we engage, we will certainly destroy many human ships. Our plasma weapons will cut through their primitive armor. But they have 300,000 vessels. Even if we destroy 10 ships for every one of ours lost, we will still be annihilated. And I do not believe our exchange ratio will be that favorable. These humans have been preparing for this battle for decades." Jothic listened to the debate, his own mind working through tactical calculations he had performed thousands of times in his long career. Every scenario came back to the same conclusion. In a direct engagement, the Grand Fleet would inflict terrible casualties on the humans, but the Grand Fleet itself would be destroyed. The Council would lose its primary military arm, and humanity would survive, bloodied but intact. "There is another consideration," Jothic said, silencing the arguing commanders. "Even if we could win this battle, what then? The humans have demonstrated the capacity to build 300,000 warships. If we destroy this fleet, they can build another. Their industrial capacity is clearly far beyond what we estimated. We would win a battle only to face an even larger fleet in the future." The silence that followed was heavy with implications. The Council had assumed humanity was limited, constrained, controllable. That assumption had been catastrophically wrong. Pelkin, who had been analyzing the human fleet composition, spoke up. "Commander, I have completed detailed scans of their vessels. The military ships are well designed, rugged and heavily armed. They do not have our advanced technology, but they are not primitive. The converted civilian vessels are less capable, but still dangerous in these numbers. What concerns me most, however, is the coordination. 300,000 ships appearing simultaneously, perfectly positioned to surround us. This level of coordination suggests a command and control system far more sophisticated than we gave them credit for." On Earth, in the underground command center, Admiral Rivera watched the timer count down. 30 minutes remained. His staff monitored the Grand Fleet continuously, tracking every movement, every energy signature, every communication burst. "They are debating," Captain Torres observed. "We are picking up significant internal communications within their fleet. Multiple encrypted channels active. They are trying to decide what to do." Rivera nodded. He had expected this. The Council had never faced a situation like this. They were used to being the overwhelming force, the unquestionable authority. Now they were surrounded and outnumbered, and their entire worldview was being challenged. "Sir, we are detecting some aggressive positioning from about 15% of their fleet," reported the tactical officer. "Score vessels primarily, moving into forward assault formations. They may be preparing to attack regardless of what the overall command decides." That was a danger Rivera had anticipated. Not every Council species would accept retreat. Some would see it as cowardice, as unacceptable loss of honor. If even a portion of the Grand Fleet decided to fight, the entire situation could spiral into violence. "Ready the containment response," Rivera ordered. "If any Council vessels open fire, I want the nearest human units to respond immediately with overwhelming but precise force. Target their weapons and engines only. We demonstrate we can destroy them without doing so. Maybe that will convince the rest to stand down." Torres relayed the orders to the fleet. Throughout Sol system, human commanders prepared their ships for the possibility of combat. They did not want war, but they were ready for it. Every crew member knew what was at stake. Surrender meant subjugation, the end of human independence, the destruction of everything they had built, so they would fight if they had to, regardless of the cost. On Station Zenith Prime, Speaker Velkoth stood before the full Galactic Council. Every species had representatives present, either physically or via hologram. The emergency session had been called to address the crisis unfolding in Sol system. The chamber buzzed with agitated conversations in hundreds of languages. "Order," Velkoth called, his voice cutting through the chaos. "We must decide how to proceed. The humans have not surrendered. Instead, they have surrounded the Grand Fleet with overwhelming numbers. Fleet Commander Jothik reports that engagement would likely result in the destruction of the Grand Fleet. We must decide. Do we order him to fight regardless, or do we authorize withdrawal?" The chamber erupted with opinions. Some species argued for fighting no matter the cost. The Council could not show weakness. Others advocated for negotiation. The humans clearly had more strength than anyone had anticipated. A third faction suggested compromise. Withdraw now, but begin preparing for a much larger military response. Crystallis, serving as Velkoth's advisor, projected data across the chamber's holographic displays. "Honored representatives, please review the intelligence we have gathered. Humanity has demonstrated the capacity to build and coordinate a fleet of over 300,000 vessels. Their industrial capacity spans 127 colony worlds, many of which we did not adequately survey. If we destroy this fleet and they build another of similar size, how would we respond? We would need to mobilize forces far beyond the current Grand Fleet. The economic and military cost would be staggering." A Krath senator, her scales gleaming with anger, stood to speak. "Are you suggesting we simply accept human defiance? That we allow a species barely 3 centuries old to reject Council authority? What message does that send to every other species in the galaxy?" "Perhaps," Crystallis replied calmly, "it sends the message that the Council values peace and cooperation over domination. Perhaps it sends the message that we are wise enough to recognize when our assumptions were wrong." The debate raged on, but beneath it a reality was becoming clear. The Council had miscalculated badly. They had seen humanity as they wished to see them, not as they actually were, and now they were paying the price for that arrogance. Back in Sol System, the timer reached 10 minutes. On the Indomitable, Rivera prepared for whatever would come next. He had done everything possible to avoid war while maintaining humanity's sovereignty. Now it was up to the Council to make their choice. "Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the Council flagship," the communications officer reported. "Fleet Commander Jothik wishes to speak with you directly." Rivera straightened his uniform. "Put him through." The holographic image of Jothik appeared before Rivera. The Krath commander's forearms were held in a posture that human intelligence had identified as indicating respect and recognition of worthy opponents. "Admiral Rivera," Jothik began, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of military experience, "I am a warrior. I have commanded fleets for 200 of your years. I have fought in 17 major campaigns. I have never retreated from an enemy. And yet I find myself in a position I never expected to face." Rivera listened without interrupting, recognizing that this moment was critical. "Your fleet is impressive," Jothik continued. "More than that, it is a testament to your species' determination and capability. You have surrounded the Grand Fleet. You could attack us now, and though we would inflict terrible casualties, you would eventually destroy us. But you offered us the chance to leave. Why?" Rivera considered his response carefully. "Because, Commander, we built this fleet to survive, not to conquer. We do not want to destroy the Grand Fleet. We do not want war with the Council. We want only to be left alone to live as we choose. We want recognition as a sovereign species, not as subjects to be controlled." Jothik's eyes studied Rivera's face. "You are warriors. This much is clear. Your species climbed from a death world, faced countless dangers, and survived through strength and determination. I can respect that. What I cannot understand is how we so completely failed to see this. How did the Council's intelligence services miss the scale of your preparations?" "You saw what you expected to see," Rivera replied. "You saw a young species with primitive technology. You did not see a species that has spent 3 centuries learning to survive in space, building on hostile worlds, creating self-sufficient colonies that could operate independently. Every hardship we faced made us stronger. Every hostile world we colonized taught us how to build and survive in the harshest conditions. And when we realized the Council would never accept us as equals, we prepared for the day when we would need to demonstrate our strength." Jothik was silent for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. "A warrior recognizes another warrior. You have proven your strength. But understand this, Admiral. Even if the Grand Fleet withdraws today, this is not over. The Council will not simply accept your defiance. They will prepare. They will plan. They may return with a much larger force. Let them come, Rivera replied, his voice hard. Let them see that this fleet is not the limit of human capability. Let them understand that if they force us to fight, we will build 10 fleets this size. Let them realize that humanity will never surrender, never bow, never accept subjugation. We would rather die fighting than live as slaves. The two commanders regarded each other across the holographic connection, warriors from different species, different worlds, different philosophies, but in that moment they understood each other perfectly. I will recommend withdrawal to the Council, Jothik said finally. The Grand Fleet will leave Sol system, but Admiral Rivera, understand that you have just changed the balance of power in this galaxy. The Council will never be the same. Other species will hear of this. Some will be inspired by your defiance. Others will be terrified. You have created a new reality, and no one knows where it will lead. Then we will face that reality together, Rivera responded. Not as masters and subjects, but as equals. That is all humanity has ever asked for. The transmission ended. Rivera turned to his staff. Maintain position. Keep weapons ready. But do not fire unless fired upon. Let them make their choice. On the Council flagship, Jothik issued orders to the fleet. All vessels stand down from combat posture. Prepare to withdraw from Sol system. We will exit through the vector the humans leave open for us. This is not surrender. This is tactical reassessment. There will be no shame in this withdrawal. Some commanders protested, particularly among the score forces, but Jothik's authority held. The Grand Fleet began to reposition, moving toward the path that would take them out of Sol system. The human fleet maintained their surrounding positions but opened a corridor, allowing the Council ships to depart. As the Grand Fleet began its withdrawal, a transmission came from Station Zenith Prime. Velkoth's hologram appeared, his four eyes showing a mixture of emotions human observers could not fully interpret. Admiral Rivera, I am Speaker Velkoth. The Galactic Council has voted to authorize Fleet Commander Jothik's withdrawal and to open negotiations with humanity regarding your status within galactic civilization. Rivera felt tension he had been holding. For weeks finally release. They had done it. Humanity had faced down the Council and survived. We welcome negotiations, Speaker, but understand that we come to them as equals, not as suppliants. Velkoth's expression was difficult to read, but his voice carried resignation. Yes, Admiral, as equals. The Council will send diplomatic representatives to Earth within 1 of your weeks. We have much to discuss. As the transmission ended, cheers erupted throughout the human fleet and across human space. Billions of people who had been watching with held breath suddenly released it in shouts of joy and relief. They had stood at the edge of annihilation and survived through strength, unity, and sheer determination. On Earth, celebrations erupted in every city. On Mars, colonists danced in the streets of their underground cities. On stations and outposts throughout human space, crews embraced and congratulated each other. They had faced the greatest threat in human history and prevailed. But Rivera did not celebrate yet. He watched the Grand Fleet departing Sol system, 10,000 warships moving in careful formation toward the edge of human space. He knew this was not truly over. The Council would not forget this day. Some would learn from it, would accept humanity as equals. Others would resent it, would plot revenge, would seek ways to humble the upstart species that had defied them. Captain Torres, Rivera said quietly as the command center celebrated around them, begin fleet dispersal operations. Return ships to their home ports, but maintain elevated readiness levels. We have won today, but tomorrow may bring new challenges. Torres nodded, understanding. Yes, sir, and sir? What you did here, what all of us did? Humanity will remember this. We showed them we are not victims. We are not subjects. We are humans and we do not surrender. Rivera allowed himself a small smile. No, Captain, we do not. As the last Council ships vanished into faster-than-light travel, the human fleet began to disperse, 312,000 vessels, each one returning to their home colony, their station, their patrol route. They had come together in humanity's greatest moment of need, and they would come together again if necessary. But for now, they had done what they needed to do. They had shown the galaxy that humanity was not a species to be trifled with. They had demonstrated that 300 years in space could produce a civilization capable of challenging powers that had ruled for millennia. They had proven that determination, unity, and refusal to surrender could overcome seemingly impossible odds. In the weeks that followed, Council ambassadors arrived at Earth as promised. Negotiations began, tense and difficult, but negotiations between equals. Humanity gained full recognition as a sovereign species. They received representation on the Galactic Council, not as a junior member but as a full participant. Trade agreements were established, technology exchanges negotiated, borders recognized. The galaxy had changed. The Council's authority was no longer absolute. Other species watched what humanity had achieved and began to question their own subjugation. Some sought independence. Others demanded better treatment. The Council, faced with potential collapse of their entire system, had no choice but to reform. And at the heart of it all was humanity, the species that had refused to surrender, the species that had turned every hostile world into a fortress, the species that had built 300,000 warships in secret and used them not to conquer but to survive. The species that had looked at the greatest military force in galactic history and said simply, no. Years later, historians would analyze the moment when Fleet Commander Jothic withdrew the Grand Fleet from Sol system. They would debate whether it was wisdom or weakness, pragmatism or cowardice. But those who were there, both human and alien, knew the truth. It was the moment when an old order ended and a new one began. It was the moment when humanity proved they belonged among the stars not as subjects but as equals. It was the moment when 300 billion humans, spread across 127 worlds, demonstrated what they were truly capable of when threatened. The Council had expected humanity's surrender. Instead, humanity's armada had covered the heavens, and in doing so they had changed the galaxy forever. On the Indomitable, Admiral Rivera stood before the viewport watching Earth rotate slowly below. The blue-green world that had given birth to humanity, the death world that had forged them in fire and ice and struggle. He thought about all the generations that had come before, all the humans who had survived impossible odds to bring humanity to this moment. They had started as prey on the African savanna. They had climbed to the top of the food chain on Earth. They had survived ice ages and plagues and wars. They had reached for the stars despite having no right to expect they could. They had built on hostile worlds because they could not accept limitations, and when threatened with subjugation, they had built an armada that covered the heavens. "We did it," Rivera said quietly to Torres, who stood beside him. "We actually did it." "We did," Torres agreed. "But you know this is just the beginning. The galaxy will never be the same. And neither will we." Rivera nodded. She was right, of course. Humanity had announced itself as a major power. They had responsibilities now, relationships to manage, a role to play in galactic civilization. The era of human isolation was over. The era of human participation was beginning. "Then we face it the same way we have faced everything else," Rivera said. "Together, determined, and absolutely refusing to quit. That is who we are. That is who we will always be." Below them, Earth continued its eternal rotation. Above them, the stars beckoned. And throughout the galaxy, species both old and young began to understand what it meant when humanity said no. They began to understand that there were some species that could not be conquered, could not be controlled, could not be made to surrender. Humanity was one of those species. And the Council, to their dismay and eventual grudging respect, had learned that lesson the hard way. They had expected humanity's surrender. What they received instead was a demonstration of what 300 years of human determination could achieve, and the galaxy would never forget it.